Hi there everyone, Tony Bogenright here to talk to you about autonomic computing and you, how autonomic technology will ruin your life. First we have to discuss what is autonomic computing. Autonomic computing is based off of what we see in nature, mostly the idea of a consciousness, trying to replicate how humans think, feel, and act. But what would this consciousness do? Well, we want it to have the ability to understand itself, to dynamically understand the context in which it exists and all of its parts, in order to know how it can make itself better and save itself from harm. We also want to have a hidden complexity, as we learned in lecture, that would keep people deceived about how complex it really is while appearing quite simple. And, of course, it should be supposedly legally and politically neutral. Now, this isn't possible because it's technology, and we'll get into why that causes that later. Governmentality. Governing is the ability to influence the conduct of others, mostly in the form of influencing group etiquette. Now, this can take the form of massive social media campaigns. People are like, hey, are you thirsty? Pepsi's not just okay, it's great. It's okay. I don't like those commercials, as you can tell. But governance should be in control of how people act to technology. Thus, humans should be able to know how to react to autonomic tech. But this causes a problem, because autonomic tech would influence governmentality, because autonomic tech would become the main influencer of governmentality, the main influencer of people, which can cause problems when humans are supposed to be influencing humans, and maybe using technology here or there. There are many different ways to think about nature. Aristotle thought that nature tended towards alternation, transformation, and metamorphosis, whereas the continental tradition thought, hey, nature is composed of things that are generated spontaneously, so anything human-made couldn't be natural, which is also what the French Romantics thought, that any human influence would make it artificial. Now, there are conceptions that ignore the possibility of hybrid technologies, such as bone spears, which are both natural and artificial because humans created them. But let's be sure to be clear about this. Autonomic technology is 100% artificial. It is not at all natural. You want to know why? Too bad! Now we're going to talk about regimes of truth, an idea created by Michel Foucault, a French continental philosopher who thought that all the information that we're giving to technology could be created to instill an idea of humanity as a whole from the information given to technology. Now this information can come from entertainment sources, marketing, health, even internet history. But the regimes of truth are also how we take physical traces and make them virtual. But this is not mediated by an authority of humanity. Instead, it's mediated by technology. While humanity still has the ability to give the data, such as the original physical traces, if we're talking about autonomic computing, they will become the authority, and humanity will be taken out of the question, and any idea of what humanity is will be created entirely by robots. Orvey discusses virtuality a lot in the paper that we read, and the cause of actions in the virtual world versus the real world is what virtuality is all about. It's about how the virtual and physical worlds are one, but simultaneously are not. A great example of this is the internet, the digital world. There's also virtual reality, which creates reality that you're not really in. So it's kind of like this idea that the virtual and real overlap parallel to each other. But virtuality allows for subjects to be changed from applying the norms of actual society to the norms of a virtual society. So virtuality can look like a utopia at first because you no longer have the constraints of actual reality. However, as time has shown, digital virtual worlds can be invaded by the physical world and the authorities therein and turn it from a utopia into a dystopia. This affects the governments of these virtual societies is handled. Since autonomic computing only takes the regimes of truth and virtual world, it can control humans inside and outside of virtual worlds through smart devices. This would create a smart environment, as Rorvey says, and then humans would be nudged all over because our entire environment would be mediated by autonomic technology. This all sounds pretty bad, because what's the point of autonomic technology if it's only there to control us? Well, as autonomic technology is a technology, it was created by humans to serve some purpose. Rorvey thinks that this purpose is because we have created too much virtual information, and we want an autonomic technology to look through that information for us and give us what we want. And the only way we know how to do that is through our own brains. So we create something that looks like our own brains that we can put into a computer, and it does all that work for us. We're basically trying to make ideal robots that have their own ideas and can make their own emotions, so they technically have programming that they have to follow, but we also want them to be free, which is confusing because it means that we want a paradox of a robot. Much like the robots from Futurama, where they all have a technological purpose, but they're all free to go do what they want, and most of them go out and get drunk. That seems like the kind of world we're leaning towards here, people. Autonomic technology and governmentality. If we continue to use autonomic technology and incorporate into smart devices, creating a smart environment, then we will have integrated it into everyday life, and it will replace the way in which humanity regularly thinks. And humans will lose the ability to think about what they think is most important, instead having it spoon-fed to them by something that thinks it knows what they want, because autonomic technology works off of data that's put into a truth regime. Taking that, it takes more data and incorporates that into the truth regime, and it creates a snowball effect. So this faces an issue, because humans are the one who create technology, and as we learned, humans have to be in control of the technology we design. So why are we making autonomic technology that we can't control? This seems like a bad idea. Finally, we're on to the debate of whether autonomic computing is natural or ideological. Now, IBM says it's the natural next step to solving our problem of too much virtual information, and it entails only neutral political and epistemological effect, which closes the gap between artifact and nature. However, it is not natural. It is not a spontaneously generated thing that's not created by humans. No, humans are completely involved in this. And of course, it's not going to be politically neutral because it is the answer to a question. And of course, it will not be it will not be a combination of artifact and nature. It will just be both. It'll be a virtual thing in the physical world, creating a smart environment that can figure out what people want and tell them that they want it, whether they know they want it or not, reducing humanity's free will. An example of this reduction to free will provided by Rorvey was the idea of the internet when it was first created, which was a wild west where people could roam free, mark their own territories, and do what they wished with it. Who knows what they wanted to do? It was mostly just chatting with each other and writing down their blogs and information. However, this freedom got infringed when real-life authorities came in and started taking down people's posts, and then when Google and other big search engine companies got big, they started regulating the results on the internet, thus reducing the utopia to a boring old recreation of the physical realm. Now this was without autonomic technology. With autonomic technology, we could take a utopia and make it into some kind of a dystopian future, a la the real Mad Max. Here's how it'll do that. You like my title there? Thanks. Public data that humans put into the autonomic technology will be converted into a regime of truth that was already created by humans. However, instead of going through technology by humans, it will be done by autonomic tech as the authority that turns this trace into a sign here. However, this is also a trace of virtual information, which the autonomic technology will then use to infer what people want, thus gathering more data, thus turning into more signs. Basically, it would become a giant AI that's learning from itself how to control humans most efficiently. Why do we want this? Because we want easiness in our lives. But how do we stop this? I'll tell you. Here's how we protect our humanity. First, we have to take things that we consider to be uniquely human, whether that be consciousness, feeling, unpredictability, spontaneity, whatever we feel that thing that makes us deeply human is. And we need to protect that from being taken by robots or technologized or whatever. Because once we do that, it will take away the ability for humans to be able to determine how they see the world should change in reference to the changing ideals of justice in the world. Instead, imposing this technology onto robots, who could do that forever and easily control humans, would mean that we now have a robotic overlord in our world instead of a human overlord, which is what we're tending toward now. In the classroom, I made the point that the AI GLaDOS from the Portal series could be a technological wonder in autonomic computing. Here's why. GLaDOS is an AI that is built by humans in order to be in charge of this lab facility, gathering new information and performing tests based on it, seeing how long people are able to do those tests, and then changing as the winds change. With more data brings more testing, brings more data, brings more testing. So we can see that there's definitely some kind of purpose there, but also free will and ability to change, and some kind of complexity and ability to determine what needs to be done. But also, as you can see, there's a lot of robotic parts there. And being in charge of a facility that makes testing grounds means that GLaDOS is in charge of a lot of hidden technology. So GLaDOS is very complex and is in charge of all the cryogenically frozen people in this entire laboratory, which is a lot, because GLaDOS needs a lot of subjects. And GLaDOS is in charge of how they act by running them through tests, and test after test determines how they act, how they react, and then GLaDOS determines how they act again by changing the tests. This is what we showed before, how the physical traces become virtual traces, but they also become signs through the use of autonomic technology. So there's not too many examples of autonomic technology naturally in media because we think they would destroy us. However, let's take the idea of the Wizard of Oz. Now, the wizard did everything that a regular autonomic technology would do. He had parts, he controlled the people through governance, which is very important to this example, because before GLaDOS didn't really have anything to control over. However, the wizard, being the head of all the people in Oz, was able to control what they thought and what they did. Now, let's imagine that instead of behind this giant head there just being a guy standing there like, "Do not look behind." Instead, we just had an AI that was learning from people what they wanted to make them compliant, to make them be alone, to make them able to be controlled. Do we want that? Do we want this guy controlling us? Looks like a freaked out Victor Frankenstein. No! All in all, autonomic technology doesn't seem like that great an innovation. While it may be good for our one example of, oh, we had too much information, there's an easy way to fix that. Purge ourselves of the information and don't allow ourselves to be controlled by humans controlling technology or technology controlling itself. It's just that easy. Now, if you excuse me, I'm going to go play Portal.